Thank you so much. Thanks for having us here. It's a great honor. We did a long trip to come here to Bangkok from Milan, and we're super excited to start this week where we will work to the workshop together with the students that will attend or are attending already the workshop. And then we're going to have this introductory event, let's say, as a conference of this topic that Professor Namtip just described. I'm not the first speaker, indeed, but I would like to say a couple of words about why we're here, how we could travel so far, so a little bit of the framework, and then give you just a couple of words, a couple of info about the institution we come from, Politecnico di Milano, so from Italy. Okay, first of all, we are traveling on a exchange program which is funded by the European Union. It's an Erasmus program. Perhaps you've heard that we have this program which is Europe-wide, but it also includes states from nations from across the world, which funds mobility of students and staff, teachers, also PhD students. So we had this in 2022, I think I remember, we agreed on this exchange between Politecnico di Milano and the School of Architecture, Urban Planning, Construction Engineering that we, all the three of us, belong to, and the Faculty of Architecture of Chulalongkorn University. And within this framework, this exchange framework, we had 3 students from your faculty, I don't know if they are here, who spent the whole semester at Polyme last spring, and they attended courses, so they did the semester abroad. I'm sure they were happy because I keep seeing their posts on Instagram and so on about their Italian trip. And then we had a first workshop in Lecco. Lecco is one of our campus, the one that Manuela, Professor Grecchi, is in charge of. It's on beautiful Lake Como. We have a campus there. We organized a workshop in June last year. We had Professors Pialada, Professor Namtip, and Professor Sirintra coming. This is, by the way, a part of a series of previous workshops that we had with you and with the faculty here, including your dean, Sarah Youth as well. So, and in this case, the topic that we've chosen for this intensive 2 weeks that we had in Lecco was, the name of the workshop was International Studio on Cities and Climate Change. So we started to introduce these topics of climate change, or climate crisis perhaps, as we should call it now, and on how cities become complex organisms that have complex behaviors, and we explore the concept of symbiosis, so of how different systems play together and can be used together to improve the resilience of built-up environments, such as cities, to changing climate. In our case, it's the warming temperatures in Italy, in the north of Italy, and more intense rainfall, which can create problems, of course, with the water. So there were some topics which are developed there. And we thought, in a way, that what we could bring here, that's the title of tonight's event, that since perhaps you've heard that the European Union is committed, or has been committed until now, to decarbonizing the continent by 2050, so by the middle of this century, 25 years from now. So moving to a decarbonized economy and essentially reducing the impacts of greenhouse gases. That has big impacts, of course, on the built environment, on how we build buildings, on how we design cities. And so we thought we could bring our experience, part of our research experience, and some projects that we have developed also with some famous architects, as Matteo will show, about 3 different scales. So we thought about the scale of the city and the transformation of railway, of disused railway yards, the scale of buildings, and the scale of the choice of materials. So we're going through these 3 different scales. So that's the idea for tonight's event. So once again, thanks a lot for having us. It's really an honor to be here. And thanks to you for coming, so numerous. It's very nice to see that you decided to spend some time with us. Just a couple of words. I was saying about Politecnico, we have a long-standing agreement between Chulalongkorn University and Politecnico di Milano. We know that it is a healthy agreement. I mean, we do have students traveling even outside these special Erasmus projects that I mentioned at the beginning. So just to give you a couple of info, I'm not going through the whole presentation, but just give you a few glimpses about our institution. We are more than 160 years old, as you see. It's an institution, it's essentially a technical university, and that in Italy means that it only deals with architecture, engineering, and design in the sense of industrial design. So we don't do general sciences, we don't do law, we don't do economics, those are in other universities in the city of Milan. We only have these three areas. And so, okay, I'm skipping this part, we don't want to brag about it. I wanted to say something about our community. Although we have only three areas, we are still a pretty large university, especially by international standards. We're almost 50,000 students, most of them studying in the area of engineering, engineerings, I should say, the several engineerings we have. About 8,000 to 9,000 are in architecture and a little bit less in design, which, as you probably know, is one of the core economic businesses, let's say, of Milano, something that characterizes very strongly the city and the economy of Milan. Then you have other numbers here, but you see we are pretty crowded, as you were saying. And we are in Milan, of course. In the city we have two campuses. One is going to be extended. And then we have some campuses in the region around, and some of them are devoted to special topics. For example, in Cremona, maybe you heard about Stradivari, the guy that did violins. And we have a acoustical engineering course, for example, over there, which builds on this incredible tradition of acoustics and instruments making. Then Manuela, of course, if you want to say something specific about the Lecco campus, you're very welcome to do that. And the other thing I wanted to mention, okay, education very briefly. We have essentially 26, that's why I was saying engineering, 26 different bachelor courses specializing in different engineering areas, and then 46 of them in the Master of Science, which is entirely offered in English. So if you're coming to study at Polyme or for an exchange period, you're not going to have any problems in finding courses and finding an offer in English that you can attend, or of course also coming for PhD programs. We care very much about that. The reason also why we do international exchanges like this one that brought us here and brought your professors in Milan is that we truly believe very deeply in the importance of being international, in the importance of opening up to the world, and importance of building communities that go beyond our national boundaries. We have now 1/4 of our students at the master level, which come from outside Italy. We're very proud of this international community that we have. We're also trying to internationalize the faculty as well. And so, I mean, everyone is very welcome to come if you want to. I will just finish very briefly. Sorry if I skip. I didn't clean the presentation, but just to give you an idea, then we have research, of course, the other big business, let's say, of our institution. We have 12 departments. We have research labs, of course, but the departments, okay, I leave it here. The three of us come from the second department on the left, architecture, built environment, and construction engineering. There are essentially two departments dealing with architecture. One is more at the scale of the city and territory, I would say, and urban policies, the first one at the top. And the second one, which is a little bit more at the scale of buildings and building technology, structures, energy efficiency, some more technical aspects, if you want to kind of separate the aspects. And then we have plenty of other departments dealing with different engineering topics. Okay, and then we have infrastructures, and I think that's enough. We don't care too much about all these other aspects. And yeah, social responsibility programs, perhaps because we talked about in the introduction about social responsibility, we do have a third line of action, which is what we give back to society as an institution. So we do have a lot of projects with especially the more deprived areas of the city or the more deprived part of the population. So we try to get out of our gates and try to do projects that involve their communities, and we have a very strong sustainability plan, equality, diversity and inclusion, and so on. And we even have some small offices in difficult neighborhoods that try to support the people in decisions, like, just to make a very simple example, I want to renovate my house, what shall I do? Most people don't have the tools to know what to do. They don't know that they can do. They don't know that they can access funding as well, public funding. So we're here to help them being there physically in these neighborhoods, and that's, I think, an interesting way to be there. Okay, polyme.it, if you're interested, you're very welcome. Sorry, this is not an advertisement, but just to let you know that you're very welcome to come also for short periods, and I'm sure your professors will be able to guide you if you're interested to come to Italy and to come to the hub of architecture and design, especially in Italy. So thanks for that. Again, I don't want to take too much time. That's just to give a little bit of a framework, so I'm passing the microphone to Manuela for the first speech.
So good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to meet you this night. My topic, as already heard, I'm professor in building renovation. So for me is something that is really important. I selected the industrial heritage and focusing on the possibility when we have to transform a huge building, what can be the approach we can follow. Of course, I have no time to explain many things. These are the main contents. The first one regards why we have to renovate and reuse existing buildings. Maybe it's easier to demolish them and redesign new buildings. The second one is the process we typically use when we have to define what is the works according to the characteristics of the buildings we want to renovate, but how we can define the new function that can be really transform and readapt an existing building. The third part is some concept related to how we can manage the transformation, so an architectural point of view. Of course, each architect will develop maybe a different strategy, but what I want to focus on is our typical approach that we have in Europe. And finally, I focus on some examples that can inspire you if you attend the workshop related to the renovation of your beautiful, really beautiful station. So, why reuse? Of course, as you already heard a lot, we have challenges in this moment. I selected three keywords. The first one regards the world population. We know and we expect that by 2050, maybe will be 9 billion people. It's not a problem of numbers. It's a problem where they live. So, which means that we expect that 70% of those people will be urban. So it's not possible to imagine that our cities can grow again. The second part is related to the energy problems. We know that the existing buildings use a lot of energy, typically for heating and cooling. So how we can manage the transformation of existing buildings? We know what to do if we have to design a new building, but how we can manage the transformation and the reduction of the use of energy. And finally, the decarbonization. Again, existing buildings are responsible for the CO2 production, so how we can manage the transformation of them. What are the goals for building renovation? For sure, again, we have many different approaches. I selected some aspects. The waste impact reduction. For sure, if I reuse an existing building, I can in a way reduce the impact of the waste, first of all. Then the resource conservation. Gabriele will introduce some aspects related to that problem. And of course, we are architects, so what is really important is recognize also the value of existing buildings. Typically, we have heritage value. It's recognized, but sometimes also buildings that apparently are not a piece of architecture, for the local community, they represent their memory. So that's why we have to analyze also these parts. And of course, also if you don't transform an existing building, we have to manage the problem of energy. So what are the works we need to introduce in the existing stock? Shortly, what is the adaptive reuse process? Again, typically, sometimes we select a new function to transform the building, but from a research point of view, for sure, we have a specific process. We have to recognize, first of all, what is the value of the existing building and why we have to maintain and readapt it. I selected again 4 keywords. First of all, the history value. We come from Italy, so Italy is famous for the historical buildings. We have a lot of restrictions because we don't have some time to touch monuments. But again, we have also a moral duty to maintain and pass to future some aspects of our history of architecture. Another aspect important is the building quality. Sometimes, also if it's not a piece of architecture, maybe the quality of the building gives us a path to be followed. So why demolish a building that has a quality and we can renovate it? Social factors. Buildings really represent something really important for the society. So analyzing very well and define what is important to be maintained, preserved, or maybe also demolition can be a strategy. And finally, sustainability, but we already talk about that. In the process, we have 3 main steps. How we manage all the information. The first important step regards the collection of information, because it's not possible to transform a building without knowing very well what are the characteristics of the building, what is the history, the transformation. Remember that each building has a history, so during the life of the building we recognize many transformations. The second step regards the organization of the information, to define what are the quality of the building, what are the works we need to imagine, to repair, to remove deterioration, and so on. The third step is really important in this moment for my lecture, because give you information related to the possible new uses you can introduce in an existing building to transform sometimes not just the building itself, but start a process of regeneration. Just to give you information, we start not from the building, we start from the urban dimension, because of course before defining what is the possible reuse, it's necessary to connect the building with the surrounding, with the neighborhood, to discover if there are some elements that can suggest the possible reuse and transformation. Of course, many information related to the building scale, because typically we need to know dimensions, we need to reconstruct the history and transformation of the building. We need to recognize some architectural value in the building itself. And of course, one of the very important parts regards the building technologies. It's difficult to know what are the technologies they used in the past in that specific building. But connecting main information, typically the location and the date of the building, we imagine what can be the real materials they use in the construction. Conservation status are other aspects. I sum up all the process in this slide. It's a circular process, so you can see that it's important what we call a SWOT analysis. So the connection at the different scales of all the information you collect. So at the scale of the context, at the scale of the building, and for sure all the rules related to the possibilities, because in Europe and in Italy we have a lot of restrictions, so we cannot transform a building, for example, not considering the possibility in terms of volume I can realize, or some specific local rules. So it's a circular process in reality, because when you start to imagine possible new uses, what is important to do is the analysis of the context impact assessment, because if the reuse is wrong, you stress the neighborhood. So it's important, again, to connect everything. Building on what is already built. Of course, it's a sort of slogan. So how we can manage the transformation? We have a specific approach typically. If you have to transform a cultural heritage, for sure, what we use typically is what we call reversibility, which means that the elements, the technology we use is a light technology. Apparently, we can remove it and rehab the old building. It's just an approach. In reality, when you start to intervene in a building, you really transform it and touch it. And what I want to focus on is that it's important to recognize the intervention. So the relationship between old and new is really important. Typically, in our culture, it's not possible to intervene today. They did it in the past a lot, with a sort of camouflage. So it's important that the intervention is really recognizable. 4 aspects, of course, we can find many other aspects. Again, I find the nicknames, fill the volume, which means that in some examples you cannot touch the architectural value of the building, so to transform it, you have just to readapt the layouts, the existing layouts, and give a new function to the building. External addition, if it's possible, sometime you add new volumes or new parts in the building itself. What I want to stress with this example, this image, is that it's important that the new parts are not similar to the existing, the historical building. So you have to design a sort of dialogue between old and new. Most interesting is boxes inside the volume. Maybe can be suggest something related to the transformation of your building in the workshop, which means that in this case, typically, we adopt this approach when we have a huge building, industrial heritage. So we define what are the spaces that need to be well controlled in terms of air conditioning, plants and so on, and what are the value of the other parts, but I have examples of that, of this approach. And finally, of course, sometimes reduce the volume. Two main reasons. The first one is related to the equilibrium at the urban scale. Sometimes it's better to decrease the volume. Other aspects are related to the quality inside the building. Huge buildings need to have a more controlled natural light. So, for example, you can open some parts of the building, create an atrium, and so on. Industrial heritage, the case of disused railway station. Again, of course, you can find many examples all over the world of transformation, because typically the huge stations realized at the beginning of the 20th century maybe are now abandoned because of the changing mobility network. So how we can reuse them? Sometimes it's not necessary to maintain them, but sometimes it's better to renovate and readapt this railway infrastructure. To introduce the topic, typically how they are, we have two parts in the station of that period. The first one is typically designed by architects, so the value of the building is something that is the most important part of the visible, is the relation of the building with the city. The second part, I like a lot the second part because it represents something really important, typically the innovation in the engineering part, because of the new structure that allow the construction of examples. I have to rush, no? The two first examples are two, I selected, maybe you know very well, Gare d'Orsay in Paris, maybe you visited it. The second one is a transformation of a part of Manseibashi station in Tokyo. Gare d'Orsay, it's a museum, maybe you know very well it. It was a typical station. You can appreciate in the image what is the value of the building. So it wasn't possible to transform it in reality because it's a monument. When they abandoned it, they decided to transform it in a museum. So they selected the function. And architect Gaia Olenti, she's a famous Italian architect, was charged to this transformation. If you compare the two images, you can see in the upper part the old station and the intervention. You can immediately recognize that the intervention transformed the building, but all the historical building is already visible. The chance was that the natural light was really good also in the original building. That's why the light that is really important in a museum was something that was in the envelope itself. So the use of materials, and it's an aspect really important because in the meantime, for sure, you enter in the building, visit the museum, that is a famous museum. There are a lot of masterpieces of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist painters. But in the meantime, the visit is to the building, because it's immediately visible what is new and what was part of the historical monument. The integration is important. So again, nothing is covered by the intervention. So the relationship between the structure that was a cast iron structure really important for the period is still visible. The second example regards another station. Of course, the style is a bit different, but the period is the same. The history of this station is that the real original station was destroyed by an earthquake, and they realized imitate the old station, but in a smaller version. What I wanted to introduce is the reuse of the viaduct. Again, for example, in Paris, but also in Italy, in many cities, you find this solution, because in the past they were not used for people. They were spaces related to services, to something function that was related to the use of the station. It's really interesting. It's an urban scale intervention, because the possibility to remove the original walls and open all these parts create a relation between the main square to the opposite part, that is the river. Typically, we reuse these spaces for commercial purpose. In the upper part, they introduce, because the line already exists, so they introduce the small elements that are dedicated to bars. Boxes inside the volume. Maybe they are really interesting for the workshop, why not? We'll discover two European examples. The first one is in Spain, in the south of Spain. This station was really important in the period, because it connected this region with the capital of Spain. When they abandoned it, the local community wanted to maintain it and preserve the monument. In 2012, they wanted to reuse this building. Now is the headquarters of Casa Mediterraneo. Casa Mediterraneo is an institution, a diplomatic institution that have to promote the common identity of Mediterranean villages. What is interesting in this case is that the designer, Manuela, had to design a building with a real low budget. So this was the original situation. It's a bit similar to your station. This is the transformation. So what is important is the definition of what is temporary use and what is a permanent use. The huge part that was the space that where the trains arrived is an open space, is a sort of covered square where they can organize many different activities, so for exhibition or other things. The transformation is a light transformation in reality. They removed the original roof, that was an opaque roof, and introduced this polycarbonate surface to introduce natural light inside. I'll give you information because of blue, but at the end of this case. They removed all the windows and all the doors to create a natural ventilation inside, because it's a hot region, and the fan in the middle of the roof create this movement. A screen shadow cover and protect from the direct light. What is more interesting is where they put the permanent activities related to the headquarters in small pavilions that surround are around the main square. Here are the pavilions, again, not many materials. So in this case, the ceiling, the roof is transparent. So to protect the people that work inside the pavilion, the roof is opaque and the natural light is filtered by the vertical facades. Of course, these spaces are controlled with plants, which means that they are air conditioned and so on. Because for temporary uses, it's not necessary to, in a way, it's a passive, what we call a passive strategy. So we use the envelope to create that climate situation. Why the colors? Because they are typical of Mediterranean villages. White and blue are the two colors they use. But be careful, because when you use transparent surface, for sure the color of the sun will create different colors inside. The second one is similar. It's in Belgium. In this case, the huge station, really important. The strategy is totally similar, but the climate is totally different. That's why they organize in a different way. Again, they put inside the pavilions to reuse the building, but they create also protected public spaces because of the dimension of these buildings. Can create also sorts of boulevards, green boulevards, in between the pavilions. In this case, the material is wood, so again, not too many materials, but typical glass for sure, wood, also for the structure and the pavilions that are 3 floors high. Here are some images. So it's really interesting because of the climate, vice versa. It's a rainy region, so it's in a cold region. So that's why you can create a protected part of the city. So it's a sort of building and urban scale in the meantime. It's really interesting also because it's an energy neutral building. So they use all the main glass facade that is integrated with the solar cells. All the roofs are photovoltaic panels, and they use also geothermal energy and collect the raining water to reuse it for the green side. Finally, a famous, really famous intervention, the High Line. I selected this one because it's a bottom-up regeneration. So what is it? Of course, it's a beautiful intervention, but what is interesting is the process. Today, High Line is really famous. It was a line that cut this neighborhood. When they abandoned it, for sure, immediately they wanted to demolish the line because they consider it a dangerous place. Vice versa, people that lived in the surrounding, it was the neighborhood was an industrial part of the city that was abandoned. So they typically young people, artists, started to reuse those buildings. So they started to discover that naturally the green grow inside this line. So they wanted to maintain and convince the administration to maintain this line. They create a no-profit association, the Friends of A-Line. They started to collect money. At the end, they convinced the administration to maintain it, and they started this process of regeneration. It's an interesting approach. Today we have many similar solutions in many countries, but what happened in reality is that the original inhabitants are not still there, because in the meantime, because it's a sort of fashion today, so this intervention attracted a lot of real estate developments, and now a lot of famous architects design buildings in the surrounding, and now the rent of the apartments is totally different. At the end of the High Line, now we have an important building that was designed by Renzo Piano, the Whitney Museum, that create the elements that conclude this intervention. Thank you very much.
I'm Matteo Ruta, me too. I'm very happy with my colleagues and very excited to be here this week with you. We really need to work with you in the workshop, and so thanks again to this opportunity. This is the title of my communication of today. And this is me. I'm a professor at Politecnico di Milano. I'm also two things that I think is maybe interesting to know. The first is that I'm an editor of a magazine. To do a magazine is really exciting. And I'm also a curator of an architectural festival. This is Archetipo. Archetipo born in 2006. Now we are in the issue 180. Every month we speak about a topic, refurbishment, hospitality, envelope, building where there is no possible enter, but are only examples. As maybe you understand the topic, the concept of the magazine, that is we need to speak about the construction of the building, and we work a lot with the drawings, the technical drawings of the building, that they redrawn. We search the drawings from architects, engineering, etc., and we redraw these buildings. And we do something like this. This is, for example, a restaurant by Zaha Hadid in London. Here was an existing building, and here is the new restaurant of Zaha. And this is, for example, a very complicated building named the Fondazione Prada, realized by Rem Koolhaas in Milan, in a light dry construction. From the 2024, last year, we are two editors, because arrived one of my best friends, architect Benedetta Tagliabue, with co-editor with me. Benedetta has a very important studio in Barcelona, in the south of Europe, in Spain. This is one image of the studio. And with the arrival of Benedetta, the cover changed absolutely, because arrived also the style and idea of the project of Benedetta. I talk about this because the two stories that I tell you this night are very much related to the work of Benedetta. The second thing in the introduction is the festival. I think it's important to talk about this festival because Milano Art Week is something like this. Every year, for 1 week, all the city of Milan, our city, is covered by advertising because we talk about architecture. We organize more than 100 events in all the city, the center and the peripheries, and we talk with citizens, we speak about architecture because we think the architecture is a real agent to change the society, to give a better life to the people. And so all the city is involved. This is one of the lecture in a park in Milan. And this is the introduction, the first lecture, the opening lecture in our building in Politecnico di Milano, the old building of Faculty of Architecture. So, I start with the first story. The first story is in Barcelona, in Spain. Barcelona is a very old city, very, very particular. Is really easy to recognize Barcelona from an aerial view because there is the city center, the old center, the Gothic district, with the street not large and geometry not regular, and the north part. Barcelona is very beautiful also because here there is the sea and there is the mountain, and so where you are in Barcelona you understand exactly where you are because you see always the mountain or the sea. And this new part was realized by an architect and engineer named Ildefonso Cerdà, and is very, very, very regular. Is named Eixample extension. Eixample is in Catalan, and they speak the language of Barcelona. This is another image. Is absolutely clear the Gothic district and the new part with these octagonal parts. And in Barcelona, for you are from Europe. In Europe, Barcelona is one of the most important cities for urban strategy to regenerate the space, the public space. From the Olympic Games in 2092, Barcelona has a lot of ideas to regenerate this city. Before the Olympic Games in Barcelona, there was a lot of problems. After the Olympic Games, start a lot of strategies, and all the people in the world learn, study what Barcelona do to understand how it's possible to regenerate a city. One of these strategies is in this district. This is a very old district named Raval. Is a very, very problematic district. This is the Raval. This is the main street of Barcelona, pedestrian street named La Rambla, with a lot of green. And this is another district named El Born. In this district, there was a lot of problem, and the strategy is we put in the district new buildings with very, very important public function. And so the first strategy is to build this museum, and the second strategy is to build this museum and cinema. This is the museum realized by Richard Meyer Architects, and is very related to this very old district. And the people immediately love this new museum, and this space are so with a lot of people every day, in every hour, and so the problems with the violence, with the theft disappear, because the people arrive to see the museum, and so the problems disappear. This is the other building designed by José Luis Matteo. Is related to the cinema of this region, and you see exactly the relation from the old city, very old city, and this new important building, very much in contact, the old and the new together. So we are now in Bangkok. Here in Bangkok you have a lot of markets. Market is important for you. Is not exactly the same in Europe, but in Spain is exactly the same. Also in Spain, markets are really important for the public life. And so in Barcelona exists a very, very important market named La Boqueria in iron and glass. Is the most famous, the most visited market is in the Rambla, in the main street. But the second market is the Santa Caterina market here, with the new project of Benedetta Tagliabue and Enrique Miralles. There was a problem similar to the other district, the Raval, because these streets was really not large. There is no light, and so the people escape from this district. Nobody needs to live here. And so the town hall decided to try to change this situation and launch a competition, an international competition, to reconvert, to retransform the old market. And this is the result. You see, it is very impressive. The old version, the previous version of the market was this, was really old, and is a closed market, Nobody needs to enter in that district. And was absolutely difficult to solve, because this is the old market, and the situation was that these streets are not open. Was not possible to go into this part, and so this part was really with a lot of problem. But there was also a lot of opportunity, because here is the main cathedral of Barcelona, the Gothic cathedral, and so the market is very near, but here there was a lot of people, and here nobody. And so Benedetta study a lot with one of the tools that Benedetta used. The tool is the collage of images, and this is the collage to understand what is around the Santa Caterina market, to understand the life before the transformation. And so she works a lot, and she decided to break the rule of the competition. Okay, the competition asked only to refurbish the market. Benedetta decided to participate with a project that don't touch only the market, but touch on also all the streets, all the districts around the market, because Benedetta had the idea to open the street, and so to demolish some buildings, and she saw if when a lot of tourists are in front of the cathedral, see something really interesting, really colorful there, need to go there, and if they arrive in front of the market, they see the light, they continue, and we have a lot of people in this district, and so the violence disappear, the problems disappear. And so with many sketches, many ideas to understand the better solution. This is the sketches that understand the idea from the cathedral. You have to see the market, and so it's necessary that the roof of the market go into the street with the color. And she thinks a lot of ideas. For example, the drawing of the roof are vegetables. Another sketches, and the Benedetta win the competition, reuse part of the old roof, decide don't touch the external wall, and so it's very important to see always the old part and the new part. The old part is in brick and stone. The new part, the new roof, is wood, steel, and ceramic tiles. And so when they start with the work, they found the rest of a monastery that was here, because in Europe there are a lot of history, and so we find always something. This is a study for the pergola. A lot of maquette. Benedetta works a lot with hands, with maquette, with wood maquette, cardboard maquette. This is always the final result. She needed to integrate also housing for elderly people, because the strategy to have people here is always to have different people of different ages. This is the image from the cathedral. From the cathedral you see something like this, so there is an attraction. Is absolutely possible to work into the market, and is quite a covered street, a new covered street, public street in Barcelona. And these are some images of the construction interior, the existing roof reused, the houses. This is a collage of material for one of the walls. Was really complicated to realize so much colors for the tiles. And absolutely, as always, a lot of drawings to make it possible, this construction. In the strategy of Benedetta, there is always the idea to work on public spaces, to work on landscape design, because it's necessary to have the city into the building, to break the difference between the interior and the exterior. And for example, this is the project for the Scottish Parliament in the north of UK, where it's very cold, and she designed these gardens and this public square. Always she needed to use the water like an agent and element for life. This is a very big park in Barcelona with a lot of water. It was one of the very first operation of real estate in Barcelona to build a lot of new buildings, and she realized the park into this new operation. And the idea of Benedetta is always to play with forms, to play with something that is really much related to the life of the people, with colors, with curves, with surprise. This is in another city, Hamburg, in the north of Germany, where with the cold the people don't live in the streets, and Benedetta changed this idea and realized this very particular, very designed square, and now all the German people needs to go outside, and it is a very important, this transformation, this use of the public space. And this is the last, was in Italy. In Italy there is a very important city for the sea named Rimini. It's quite Phuket, is plain with a lot of people. Rimini had a very big problem because there was quite a separation between the sea and the city, and Benedetta, with this project that mix pedestrian spaces and green spaces, break this division between the city. The letter R is the letter of Rimini, the first letter of Rimini, and so the lamp is referred to this. Okay, I start with the second of the story. The second story is in Milan, our city, and Milan completely changed. Barcelona completely changed after the Olympic Games, but Milan completely changed after the International Expo. This was the Expo in 2015. You know, this year opened the International Expo in Osaka. 15 years before Osaka, we have in Milano this very important Expo. The legacy of the Expo is that after the Expo, Milano completely changed. Was a city with a lot of problems, a lot of spaces impossible to change, and with this event, with this big event, also the politician, also the people, also the investor, so the private, need to arrive in Milano to do a better city. And so this was one of the images of the Expo. And for example, the really famous Bosco Verticale of Stefano Boeri is one of the architecture realized in one of the districts completely transformed after the Expo. And so also the enormous success of this building that is really known in every part of the world, Milano begin really famous in the world of the finance world and also the architectural world. And so we have a lot of projects now in Milano. And this is the second story. The second story is about the transformation of 7 big areas in Milano. The areas was the railway yards of Milan, because Milano is a city with a very interesting and recognizable geometry, because our circle, the circle was the ancient walls of the city, and one of this circle was water, because Milano was quite a little Venice in the past, with a lot of artificial canals, and so water was really important for the city of Milan. And in this moment we have only one part of this canal, and the other was covered to do streets with cars. This is the situation. In Milano there was 7 railway yards in use, was areas that the owner was the railway of the state, the Italian railway, and they use for operational rails, but there is no reason don't use these areas, because the value, the economic value of these areas is really big, and so now we need to change this area and to create a new district. You see one of the really big, and then is near the Bosco Verticale, is absolutely in the center, but also this is very big. This is, for the example, the dimension of this railway yard. Here the people can't arrive. There is a walls that is not possible to enter in these areas, and so I born in Milan, and so when I was here, I understand for the first time that it's really easy to do from here to here, but I don't think that is possible, because usually to do this we do, and so for us it's far, but it's not far, it's really near, but is an hidden space into the city. Is a great opportunity to enter in these areas, in these railways yard. This is also the main Farini. You see, this is the center of Milano with the skyscraper. This is Bosco Verticale. This is the second, Porta Romana. Here there is the Fondazione Prada of OMA in construction. Here we have now the Olympic Village for the Olympic Games in Milan next winter, because we have the Olympic Games next winter. This is Porta Romana. So it's a really great opportunity to recover these yards, but it's absolutely really difficult, because the private need to gain money, to have a lot of money with this operation, and the public, the city, need to have a park, to have public buildings, to have a better life. And so it's not easy to find the good solution to start this operation. And so what Milano do to start with this operation? They start with a workshop open to all the citizens, a workshop open to all the citizens to speak about what you need in these spaces, what is your idea of the life in these new spaces. And so we talk a lot for 3 days with a lot of people, and there was 5 chiefs of this workshop, and the chief was architects, because the city needed to have 5 teams with 5 really famous architects that talk with the city to do not project but vision, concepts. It's not easy, don't draw, because it was not the competition to gain the possibility to design exactly these areas. It's only concept to say to the city, yes, it's necessary to do this transformation. And so was concept for the people. Oops. We have a lot, because in all the 5 teams there are a lot of people, sociologists, historian, urbanist, designer, etc., etc., etc. We work a lot, because in only 3 months we have to do the vision for the 7 areas. And so we work a lot about the history of Milan, about the problems of Milan. We play a lot. This is the manifesto. Manifesto is manifest, but in Italian, mani is hands. And so for us, this is the manifesto we do with the people of the city to understand the idea the people have about these new areas. We study a lot the story, the circle of Milan, and we start with this, that is a summary of our ideas. For each of the 7 railway yards, we give a new name of this district because we think it's important to preserve the memory of this new area, and so each area, the name of each area starts with the word scalo. Scalo in Italian is a railway yard, and after scalo always a word that understands the main function of that area for us. And so this is the scalo, the railway yard of innovation, the railway yard of young people, of design, of the light, of the water, of the agriculture, and of creativity of design. We study a lot to arrive to these 7 ideas. We do a lot of collage to understand what is really important, and one of the things that was really important for us is to rediscover the water in Milan, and to have water in all the 7 areas. We understand that it was absolutely necessary to do a lot of strategies in all the 7 areas: cool island, green areas, water, mitigation surfaces, color and material that can mitigate, of course the water, and also strategy about the shading, for example, the green gardens, but was a lot of words, a lot of text to explain our ideas. We study also rules for the shapes of the building, for the aids of the buildings. The technology that was necessary to have, the study that was necessary to do to have good buildings in that area that is into the city, and so with a lot of construction. Strategy. And we do a lot of collage. This is, for example, our collage for 2 scali very near, San Cristoforo and Porta Genova. This is the scalo with the water, because one of the part of the water that exists in Milan is in this scalo. And this is real. This is the old harbor of Milan, and this is the only canal that we have in this moment. The shape of this yard are strange because was for the train, was not for the people. And you see, this is not a real project. This is like a concept. We say a vision. This is the impression. It's only the impression, are not real building, are not real facade. This is the brief we have. Ideal section. This is Farini with a lot of water. For example, in this facade we have flowers because it's concept, it's absolutely concept, it's vision, and so the material is not important. It is important to have a skyscraper, a landmark in the middle, a lake in the middle. The height of this building is to connect to the next existing city, but it's only concept. And we work a lot with the collage to arrive to this idea. This is a Grecchi, where there was a factory of cars, and so the suggestion was to use the mobility. the lights, a lot of bridges, because one of the problem of this railway yard was that separate two parts of the city, and so the concept is to reconnect and with bridges, with passage. After this, the 5 teams present to the city the results, the ideas, during the design week. That is the most important event that we have in Milan, with a lot of people from all over the world that arrive in Milan. And the event was in one of these scali, with a lot of people that we talk about our vision. This is Benedetta. This is our manifesto with our collage. And so after this, the city decide, okay, for us is okay. We can sell these 7 areas to private to change completely these areas. Okay. For us is good. And so we start with a very different situation. For example, okay, this is a number. For example, the first scalo, the bigger, the Farini scalo, was won in a competition won by OMA Remcolas with the Laboratorio Permanente, and they are quite starting the transformation. One of the leaders is always a competition win by Arup and Barre Calavara, and is in construction. Lambrate Yard is in a competition that we participate, but we don't win the timing. Okay. And Porta Romana also start. I have no time to explain all, and so this is the proposal for the winning proposal of OMA for the Farini district. Is a very open concept, a very open project, because for the transformation of these areas are very, very, very long, and so maybe 40 years to completely transform these areas. And so the project of OMA is really flexible to follow what in Italy can change in these decades, in these 40 years. And so is a project that work a lot about important decision, but also the possibility to change this decision. And so, for example, if Italy have a big disaster and exit to the Europe, we built very, very low. If Milano became the most important city in Europe, we can build a lot. And this is the other scenario. Maybe this probably real scenario was like this. This is a second, the Greco Pirelli, is in construction, and this is Lambrate, is our proposal for Lambrate, was a competition, is really near to Politecnico, is not easy to understand what we do, because was a reinventing cities competition, and we have to give a solution for 7 challenges. This is our proposal. We study a lot. We propose 5 new square every square is related to an important function, and we propose different function: housing, student housing, public spaces for association. This is the hostel for young. And we have to study a lot because there are a lot of rules to respect. We have a lot of study to do about the situation before and after the project. Urban studies, landscape studies, social studying. For each of the challenge, for each of the 10 challenge, we have to explain how we solve a problem. With materials, with installation, with the shape of the buildings, with age of the buildings, with the low carbon material used in the buildings. One of the most important things for us was to work with the people of the districts. And so, for example, the 9th challenge is inclusive action, social benefit, and community. We talk with 40 associations of citizens in the city to understand what was the better solution to have in this new district. But we lost. Thank you. Sorry.
Matteo was very modest. We came second by a very, very, very short distance from the first one. So second is not winning, of course, but better than nothing. Better than last. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Matteo. You've seen a number of aspects that time did not allow to go into the details of every single design decision, and there were many that had to be taken to deliver the proposal for the project, the last one that Matteo showed in Lambrate, because one of the goals of the Reinventing Cities competition was to demonstrate that the development would, in the medium term, become zero carbon across the life cycle. So in 30 years' time, the project should show that it has become zero carbon. And many of the strategies that Matteo just sort of anticipated were going in that direction of using say, some KPIs probably about the use of renewables, about how you treat the water and keep it on site, about the use of materials and the choice of materials, and so on. So, going back to the topic of decarbonization, which was part of the two previous presentations as well, I'd like now to shift a little bit the point of view. You see several nice slides with projects and colors and ideas. I got to tell you, a little bit more methodological. How tired are you guys? Okay, good. It's all right. So you can bear with me for like 20 minutes. So the topic I'd like to introduce now is the topic that we're working on with a research group, a small research group that is led by me, and I'm tutoring a PhD candidate at Politecnico, and we put together a bunch of other people to develop some numbers, a framework of course, but supported by numbers, about the concept of circular economy and on how you could imagine to introduce materials coming from circular economy loops. Discussed that already previously, in a normal, regular design process. So how do we integrate this, not as a special thing that some very enlightened designer wants to do, but something that can become part of the design equation in a way together with the other elements that we use to develop a design. And it's I left this for the last, in a way because it deals with a smaller scale, a more granular scale, which is the scale of materials, but on the other because it also touches on other aspects, the other scales that were discussed by my colleagues before, which is also meaning that we should understand the situation at the scale of the city or at the scale of the territory to develop effective urban mining and therefore circularity strategies. And then this also impacts on the design of buildings. So it's a sort of horizontal cross-cutting challenge that we need to deal with. I don't want to say that we cracked it, not yet, but I hope I can give you some food for thought in terms of some of the thinking that we are doing and some of the things we see on the horizon. First, some numbers, figures, always important to open up the discussion. And figures that I got to tell you, to be honest, when we started investigating this topic, we were not totally aware of how big the problem of resources is. That was mentioned in the introduction by Professor Manti, but the built environment is a huge consumer of resources, probably more than each of us in this room thinks. Generally speaking, we are using resources beyond the capacity of the Earth to regenerate those resources. Pretty sure you know this. We are living now at the, like if we had two planet Earths to support our need for resources. We don't. And if we carry on as we are doing, in 2060, 50, we will need 3 planets. We don't. We have 1, obviously. We know very well. Point 1. Point 2, buildings. We're a big part of the problem. So that's a big question mark for us, for our, also morally for us, what we are doing, what we are doing here on the planet, what's our role. Knowing that, from the beginning of the 20th century, as you see here, we have accumulated a tremendous quantity of materials mined from the ground, mined from the earth crust, and we have frozen those materials in buildings, infrastructure, and the other things that we build to live the life that we live. Just construction minerals that are used for concrete, are used for steel, and so on, increased 34 times since the beginning of the 20th century. We now have a lot more accumulated, 792 gigatons of materials that we have stored in buildings that are more than the biomass of the entire planet. Trees, animals, whatever you want to put. So, we have a problem, right? And the problem is that, in that situation, the construction industry is, you see, responsible for the largest share of the world's total production of materials. 60% of raw materials go in buildings and infrastructures. So we have an incredible role. 40% of steel, 40% of raw stone, gravel and sand. Gravel and sand are used to do concrete, of course. We are facing a situation where, as Manuela, I think, said, we are going towards a situation where more and more people will want to move to cities in this century. We got to build spaces for those people. Look at the amount of sand, gravel, and crushed rock that we will need in 2050. It's double the one we use today. Sand is already a critical material. Sand is already a material that we know we struggle finding because there's a lot of people wanting to use sand. And we lived in a world up to now where we designed things thinking or imagining that there was no limit, that we were just, using a little bit of all the materials that are available on the planet. It's not like that anymore. We are reaching some limits. We are hitting some barriers. That's a big point. I don't have big answers. I don't expect that I will give you big answers. But I want to paint, okay, the picture. So increasing the population, increasing of urban fraction of the human population, so more and more buildings, of course, which will be required. So from the point of view of the mindset, what is the goal, let's say, okay, at the higher level of thinking? Is that up to now what we've done was, okay, we need to build something. Anthropogenic stock is a very academic way to say what human beings have built, okay? And, well, to do this, in the past, we have always looked at the Earth, at the geological deposits of the Earth. And we said, oh, beautiful, there is some iron in the crust. Let's dig the crust, and take out some iron, let's process it, and let's put it in our buildings, right? Now we have sort of frozen, we have invested and frozen that incredible amount of material that we've seen before, which is already extracted, it's already used in some form. In that column, we have a certain amount of sand, a certain amount of gravel, some reinforcement bars, and so for everything that surrounds us. And those are materials that require effort, energy, money, life, labor, to take out. So the question is, can we go to a situation instead where we find that at least part of what we need come from the stock that we already have engaged now, and we don't need to go and find the materials for the future needs. We will have future needs, of course. But those future needs can be satisfied, at least in a significant part, by the anthropogenic stock. And so how do we understand how we can use it, how much we can use it, how can we use it in a process, how do we modify maybe a little bit the design process in a way that we can, okay, gently push designers to include waste, let's call it waste, in the design process. Waste as new materials that can be used, which is a principle of circular building design that you certainly have heard of. It's a big deal in Europe, for example. The European Union, across the 27 states of the European Union, we got 850 million tons of construction demolition waste per year. It's a lot, of course, and only part of that is reused. Most of that goes to landfills and essentially becomes useless. It's lost, right? This is a topic that, of course, includes different scales. That's why I was mentioning before the different scales of the building or the materials and the choice of materials and components, the design of the building, the design of the city, and the knowledge of what we have in the city. So it's a cross-cutting challenge in a way, something that really engages all the different phases and all the knowledge we have about the built environment. Just to mention, so different scales, different steps. We've got, of course, the building design, which includes the material selection, and there's a big moment when we can do something about it. The reduction of waste in the construction phase, the appropriate renovation and treatment of materials across the life cycle of buildings. I mean, there are several points you see here on the right where something can be done from that point of view. In different ways, by the way. In some cases, during the dismantling of a building, you might recover pieces that you might reuse as they are. Some other cases, the materials, like that column, you cannot probably take it as it is and cut it and reuse it somewhere else. You've got to go down to the constituent elements and from them create new elements, which you can do in different ways. More or less efficient, but you can do it. So the question is, okay, we live in a world, it has been said before, in a world with scarce resources. How can we imagine to adapt at least a little bit the design process to recognize these limitations and to find ways to say, okay, I want to use materials coming from circular processes, from circular loops. How do I do it? It's easier said than done, of course. How do I do it? Because, you understand, you don't find everywhere this kind of stores and shops of decommissioned materials. It's very difficult to match the need from the designer with what the market offers at that specific point in time. There are several aspects that need to be figured out. But in a way, certainly from our point of view as designers, starting to think also in a way that, again, because resources are not unlimited, we should try to think that the reuse of circular materials can be part of the design decisions, okay, the several design decisions that we take as we design a building and as we select and specify the materials for that building. So to do that, we need to form some knowledge. We need to know what is out there. So now I gave you aggregate data, but what do you do with the fact that there are 792 gigatons of materials around? Nothing, probably, right? You could say to a friend sometimes, but it is what it is. We got to come to estimations of the materials that are embodied in the building stock, as you see here, and understand how many and how frequently these materials come out of the existing buildings because they're demolished, because they're renovated, because they're replaced for other reasons, and to say, okay, I understand I have a certain amount of, I don't know, concrete this year in the area of Bangkok. Okay, can we imagine that there is a market for crushed concrete and how much can that concrete cover of the need for concrete that the Bangkok market requires every year? We don't know these things, I tell you. I mean, if you look at scientific literature, we are not having clear ideas about that. We know that these are important problems, and there are some efforts that you see here. I'm not going into details, but essentially you've got to be able to study what is the situation. You do it in different ways that can have different types of resolution, different temporal scope. Is it in future? Is it in the past? Is it what happens? What do you measure? All of the existing stock? Do you go down to the material level, to the components, the building? What do you measure? What's the metric? Size, weight, numbers. I mean, you understand there are lots of things that need to be clarified and agreed upon before we start doing that. So we got two ways to do that. One is top-down approach. Top-down is easier, so it takes information from producers and resellers of materials at the typically national scale. You understand what comes in, what goes out. It's relatively easy, but it doesn't give you, it's aggregated. The data are aggregated. It's very difficult to come down to the level of decisions on design decisions on single buildings. That means we got to go the other way around, so bottom up. Bottom up is more precise, but more resource intensive, resource in the sense of our mind. So we got to do a much more precise estimation of what the built environment is made of the characteristics of the existing built environments, and then trying to go down deep into these elements and try to understand what materials are there. And I'll show you an example shortly. Spoiler, this is the route we have taken for our study. And that is what we have in cities. That is what activates what's called urban mining. So the idea that cities are mines, so are big deposits of materials that are not geological deposits, are man-made, human-made deposits, and we can take the resources out of these mines, out of these deposits, exactly as we do with the natural deposits the mines that we have in the Earth surface. Also because, again, as the first sentence there, how much is there? How much sand do we have on the planet? Is it going to last forever? Is it going to be enough for a population of 12 billion people, 70% of them living in cities, and wanting to build concrete buildings? In some countries, this is already a big question mark, as an example. Okay, there are some concepts that I'll skip because otherwise it goes too long. There are aspects of criticality, so critical. There are, resources that we know are not many, resources that are scarce, but we know that there are resources that are also critical, and the critical resources are the ones that where we know that there might be supply disruptions, and that those disruptions could be critical on the economy and on the society. If we stop finding sand, we cannot build concrete. If we don't build concrete, we have a problem, right? So it's critical. So question is, designer, we are designers or people that work in the field of design. What is the point? Can we find a way to match, to align, the need of materials that we have from buildings with the supply, so the possibility of finding those resources that we want to have? In this moment, it's not really, it's pretty much approximate if there is any thinking at all about this topic, and the things are mostly misaligned, because also there's no information, no reliable information to know that. And the question is, can we design a framework for material-aware design that has some info about the supply side, so what can we afford to use, and the demand side. I have a building, I have a residential building, and that building requires a certain amount of materials and so on. Can we make these two ends match? And can we make these alignments, which is not easy. So, I'm not staying too much on the framework. I want to show you the example that we're doing. But the ambition is that in a way, when designers select materials, aside from technical issues, economic matters, of course, which are leading, aesthetic concern, there might be also sustainability topics that must be taken into construction, which are typically, today probably is more common to find designers that are aware of carbon emissions. And perhaps, you say, I'll take wood because it has negative carbon emissions, rather than steel or other metals, which have high emissions. But we would like that material availability also becomes part of the discussion, becomes something that designers in a way become aware of. On the other hand, we have to know, as I was saying before, the knowledge about the resources that are available. And those resources might be virgin, the ones that we take from natural resources, or secondary, circular, coming from existing material stock. And how we do it, I'm sorry it has to expand, but it becomes more complicated. But virgin resources, we got to do criticality assessments, and then understand if it is critical, how many natural reserves we have, and so on. And for the existing material stock, we do material flow analysis, top-down, the one I mentioned before, or bottom-up estimations, that tell us something about how the material is distributed. I will come to show you in a moment how this is done. But once we know the resources, so we have this info, that's connected to the material availability over there, and the designer here can make informed choices, at least, knowing what he or she is doing, what is being selected, and how this selection is part of a bigger picture, which includes the limited availability of materials. And then from here we will in the future, develop some KPIs, some indicators, which should set the bar for the expectation for what to ask designers. Now there are some regulations or some standards that just tell, you should put 50% of the material from recycled sources. I say, how did you decide that 50%? It's just a number. out of the blue. Yes, 90% of the times. So how do you decide? What was the benchmark? What is technically feasible nowadays, based on the buildings we design, based on the material markets that we have, based on knowledge about urban mining and the circularity of material. So what we've done, I can skip this one, we started working, okay, this is the city of Milan again, now you recognize it. We took one district of the city of Milan, which is described in the geoportal of the municipality, and from here we started to construct a model of that part of the city. A model is not the reality, of course, as you know very well. A model is a representation of reality with a reasonable degree of approximation. And so we started from a number of sources: GIS data, information about the construction year, the typology, the height of the footprint, to essentially come through the definition of some archetypes that are repeated, and the size of the buildings, and the understanding from literature about what materials were used in different periods of time to build some types of building, to try to understand, okay, how much material there is out there. It's a model, okay, so it's an approximation. It doesn't have the expectation to be precise and to know that that building exactly has those kilograms. But at least in terms of order of magnitude, that's what we wanted to do. So we started from GIS information that's publicly available about, in this case, the function of buildings, the total gross floor area, the year of construction. This is an area that you see starting late 19th century and was developed mostly during the 20th century. We define, based on literature and books of standard practice and so on, some archetypes based on the age. We consider essentially housing being in that district most of the functions. And then, okay, we say, okay, that's archetype 1, archetype 2, 3, 4, 5. And we had some information about the geometry, how much wall to window ratio we have, and so on. And essentially, we remodeled the city by approximating and say, okay, if the building is residential from 1920s, very likely it will be not too different from that one. So again, it's an approximation of the reality in a model. But that allows us, okay, once you know the type of construction in the different periods, we could do essentially a materials list for each of the archetypes, and then we came to what is called in literature a material cadastre, so essentially a list of the materials that you have, where they're located, and we got these diagrams that show, for example, that wood is, I'm sorry that the colors are the same even if the numbers are very different, but in each case it's cubic meters, okay, of materials, and you can spatialize them. You can say where they are located in space. You can build a map of the city with the intensity of materials available across the city, with different colors and so on. There is a lot of bricks because that's late 19th, early 20th century. And then some other parts are also about concrete and so on. And then final step is looking at what happens in time. I mean, those materials are frozen. When are they taken out of the existing building stock and are made available for new construction? So they enter the circular economy process. To do that, we have done, again, estimations about the life cycle of the building, the age, the renovation processes, so again, some assumptions. And we've seen that, okay, there are materials that become available more quickly, some other less quickly. This diagram is not entirely accurate for the moment because this is the cumulative amount of materials, but of course, you don't let them out. I mean, they're out there and potentially someone uses them, so they go away, so it should be something like more oscillating. But the idea is this, that we got to spatialize, so we know, for example, I want to take my material in a radius of 50 kilometers, I don't know, something like that. And how much of each material is available every year, or in a time step, that make it possible to take decisions. Okay? So when we know this, we can compare that availability of materials with the materials we need to build a building. And we've taken some existing buildings by Park Associati, collaborating with this research. So it's a student housing here and an office building here, representative of a good bunch of new construction in Milan. And for each of these buildings, we try to understand the circularity potential of each of the buildings. Circularity potential in terms of, okay, now we know the materials. Can you source those materials from secondary sources, so from circular economy? Yes, no, and that might be different for each of the categories, of course, materials, and we can come down to a certain circularity potential. And then, of course, there will be the market, some more or less expensive materials. There will be materials that can be found in the area, so urban mining. Some other things could be from recycling off-site, so far away from the site, or directly reuse on-site of some material if it is a demolition work. Maybe you reuse the crushed concrete, for example, and so on. And we started applying this to some final thesis project of final year students. Is a housing where we try to understand, okay, the housing, pretty regular housing, where and how much circular materials can we use here. Some of them are materials that are reused as they are, metal grills, walls, even electrical ducts that can be used, or roof tiles that can be used as facade cladding, rain screen cladding. And we ended up with some, okay, it's the first iteration, we know this is not true in general, but we came to the understanding that 56%, the greenish hues here, could come from recycled materials potentially. Recycled, part of them urban mining, light green, potentially from other sources, but not used, not specified in this bill. So potential 56, actual a little bit less, 38, just to give you an idea. Plus, of course, trying to find materials that are low carbon intensity, such as CLT panels in timber. So once we've done that for a significant number of buildings, we would like to find benchmarks, essentially, and define what benchmarks are reasonable, considering this availability of materials on site, and then using other indicators, but that's something that is still going on. So, and testing this framework that is designed here. That's the theme, and I'd like to conclude with a sentence by Jane Jacobs, 1969, who, being the very good scholar that she was, already in 1969 said, as you see, that future cities will become huge, rich and diverse raw material mines. And these mines will differ from any now to be found because they will become richer the longer they are exploited. And new veins, formerly overlooked, will be continually opened. So I think that this is an additional layer, in a way, an additional ingredient to design that I hope will also stimulate all of you during your career. So thank you.